Hi, my friend.
Howdy.
Welcome to this is Wine Slut the podcast. I bet you didn't know I
Nice.
had a podcast. Yeah. Um, Nobody listens to it except Brandon Anders, the tasting room manager at Story of Soil, but that's okay. It'll just be the three
That's
of us.
okay. Well, we're gonna change that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna see you later because we're having dinner.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but I saw you last week with a WSET class that I was teaching.
Yes.
And we had a very small conversation about CO2 and carbonic
Yes.
maceration that made me
Yes.
want to talk about natural wine with you because the beginning of this podcast started with me saying that natural wine has ruined the wine business. And so I took a really hardcore stance. And the reason that I said that was because natural wine has become such a thing in our wine zeitgeist. Everybody has gotten on the natural wine wagon, even people who are not making natural wine, if that makes sense
Yes.
to you. Like what we're seeing is like Peter and I were talking about this morning, like so what's the equivalent to like greenwashing? And so I wanted to actually talk to you, and I want you to tell me I'm wrong, first of all. And then secondly, I want you to explain to me kind of what, like, talk to me about natural wine. What is natural wine to you? Like, if you're a natural winemaker, what are the parameters?
I don't. I think in some realms, that natural. I consider myself a natural winemaker, but I consider myself a winemaker that makes
Okay.
wine. That makes wine naturally.
Okay.
No, well, the idea is that I think I think how we're all taught to make wine is kind of wrong in a sense that we're taught to use adjuncts and additives and all these other things to make wine that aren't needed, and it's just it's kind of like being a cheesemaker and thinking that the only way to make cheese is to make American cheese. That you have to have an emulsifier or some kind of thing to make cheese melt better, or all these other things. And I think wine is the same exact way. And then when I went to school for wine, they teach you, oh, you're going to add, you add this. If you're nutritionally deficient, you're going to add that. You're going to add this at this point. You're going to add these manoproteins and all those other things. And I don't think that we need to do all that to make really good wine. I think the concept that everybody uses of terroir, that you're going to show a sense of place. But if you're making wine and adding enzymes or pectinases to break down, and you're picking at such high sugar that you have to add water and add acid, you're not showing that sense of place. You're showing winemaking, and that's perfectly fine. But that's terroir, like greenwashing. That's terroir washing in a way. So if we
I
all
like
get
this new
back to
word.
the roots of it, if we all get back to the roots of it, that you pick grapes, you do a pied de couve or something like that, and you ferment it with indigenous yeasts, and you make a wine, and you can add sulfur and things like that. That those tools that are given to you, that school gives you, should be tools for last resort to fixing what's wrong, or knowing that's part of the winemaking, is knowing how to how to go forward when something goes wrong, not just doing it prophylactically.
Right. Okay, so I have a question about terroir, right? I agree with you. You're picking too ripe, we're adding water and acid, like we're getting away from a sense of place. But what if you're making wine on the more natural side, right? Your fermentation is really stinky. You have low nutrients. You're producing either hydrogen sulfide or you get some acetic acid issues. And now you've got wine that kind of smells like more, actually, I would say, like the winemaking or the lack of winemaking, than it does smell like the sense of place. Like, where do you, like, how do you see
Well,
that?
that there are plenty of people that make wine naturally, but I think a lot of that is people not taking care or doing the right things at the right time. Like if like we don't add sulfur at the crusher or anything like that, and we pump over and we cover them up. Yes, we do use CO2, And that's a big thing. But if you're pumping over and you have a pied de couve and you inoculate right away, and usually it's producing enough CO2 if you keep the cap wet, and you monitor those things and keep them covered and do that, you don't need to worry as much. And do things start to smell? But fermentation is pretty cleansing. It's like once it starts going, if you have a sluggish fermentation, if they're nutritionally deficient, but we've had wines that are really low. But if you have low sugars and you're making wines that don't have really high sugar and potential alcohol and a decent pH, it's pretty clean. Like the idea is like if you're 3.5 pH, not a lot lives there. So we don't have, and if a little bit of a smelly fermentation in the beginning, if you pump it over and you keep it covered, it'll start fermenting. It'll produce CO2, and that's at least my experience, and that we don't have to do all those things right away. It's just the way people, are taught to do it. That you have to add all this stuff, but that's not really, that's the Jules Chauvet. If you think of the Gang of Four, and those things, that's really what he taught them in Beaujolais. Is like the guy had a PhD. He was a trained enologist, but he's like, you don't have to add everything. And that's what he would say. Yeah, he wasn't anti-sulfur, but prophylactic, like additions of all kinds of things is just, you're making American cheese.
Do you not like Velveeta?
Well, it makes if you're making queso, there is no substitute. Terry, Jeff's wife, has the best recipe.
Jeff
for
Fisher
queso.
of Habit Wines.
Yeah, Jeff Fisher of Habit. Yeah, his wife Terry has the best recipe for queso with some secrets, but you need Velveeta.
And okay, so would you say, well, this is where I start to get like I get it. Like I like the finest cheeses, but I also grew up in Georgia where American cheese was used everywhere. I don't know what they use at In-N-Out Burger, but this is my other.
It melts well.
It melts really well, right? I didn't know that was because of emulsifiers, but you're telling me that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think my issue with natural wine has been the way that it is spread like in a cult or kind of like a religion, right? That I get people that come into the tasting room and ask me if I make natural wine. And then I say back, well, I don't know, like what's your definition of natural wine? We use SO2 in our winery. We are native yeast. We don't inoculate for ML. We don't water back, like we don't pick late and water back. We have chaptalized, right? We have had some things that have come in.
99% of Burgundy.
Yes, right. But that's it. So this is where I get into this issue of like additives and what natural wine is. So if we chaptalize, now this is the truth. When we chaptalized, we used C&H sugar from Albertsons because it was available and it wasn't organic. I'm sorry. It just, because you have to add a lot of sugar to raise the alcohol, even like 0.5%, like a lot of sugar.
25 pounds for one brick per ton.
Yes. It's a lot.
Yes.
So when you're dumping 50
how much
pounds,
sugar there is in wine.
Well, yeah, except it gets all consumed by the yeast, right? And none of that sugar remains. So I start to think about additives. Being, is it what you're adding to the wine or is it what remains in the wine? And I think about this like in terms of even adding DAP, which is something that we don't like to do in the winery at all. What we like to do is fix our nutrient deficiencies in the vineyard, right? Yeah. If our grapes are coming in nutrient deficient, we stopped working with this vineyard. I don't know if I should say the name of it, because every year we came in and our nitrogen levels were so low that we were having to add DAP. And it was like, well, how do we get out of this? It was not our vineyard. They didn't listen to how we wanted it farmed. So you just stopped with the grape contract, right? And that's a bummer. But DAP is in essence, or should be, completely consumed by the yeast. So it doesn't remain in the final wine. If you chaptalize and add sugar for the point of raising alcohol, it doesn't remain in the final wine. Do you still consider those additives?
DAP? Yes.
Okay.
DAP's inorganic.
Do you want to explain?
It's an inorganic salt, diammonium phosphate.
Okay.
You make bombs with it too. So that's what Timothy McVeigh used to blow up the building.
But I think that's how we scare people. We say, well, DAP can be used to make bombs, and they're putting it in your wine. Like those two things aren't.
No. But excessive DAP produces ethyl carbamate, which is a carcinogen. So
but alcohol is a carcinogen.
yeah. But the point here being that um you're told like in how low the yeast assimilable nitrogen in your fermentation is, but the amount of nitrogen that it takes to ferment something at 12% alcohol versus the amount of DAP it takes, the amount of nitrogen it takes to ferment something at 24 is exponentially higher. So I've had fermentations where yeast assimilable nitrogen's 100 or lower, and it's fermented dry because it's not just the nitrogen. They use amino acids, and yes, they might get smelly because those assimilable nitrogens are bound to something else and they contain sulfur, but that all comes out in the wash. Like the wines end up being fine, and I fermented ones at 50 with Yans. So,
Well,
and they get dry.
let me ask you, just because we like, if Brandon is listening to this, and he works in a tasting room, so he's not working in the winery. So can you talk about actually, because this is what, can you talk about Yan? This is what we worry about. I would say a lab would tell you that your Yan should be at about 200, right?
Yes.
Anything below that, you should be adding some sort of yeast nutrient, diammonium phosphate, yeast hulls, maybe. Yeah. I don't know what else that you guys might add. You guys don't add anything, but
no.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point, is you got to look at who's telling you, and you probably have done this. You've sent stuff off to a lab and they've told you, oh, there's one colony forming unit of this, you should filter.
Absolutely.
But so
you know what we get? Pediococcus colonies too numerous to count. That's what we've gotten with Pediococcus. Exactly. Too numerous to count. We do get a little worried about that.
But if you took the wine that you think is probably the greatest wine ever and you plated it from a bottle, if it wasn't filtered, and it'd probably say lactic acid bacteria or Pediococcus too numerous to count, because they put it through a filter, they take that filter pad and they put it in a growth medium, and then it grows in there. Well, if you don't have anything in your wine and there's alcohol in your wine and you don't put it in a growth medium, of course whatever's in there is going to grow. So It's like that. It's making a choice that, don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. So that's kind of the thought that I have, is yes, and we've made wines that have gone sideways and don't taste good, but there's a certain amount of pride in making a wine, and that has all been attributed to, I think, bottling. Because we were using bottling line that we were getting high oxygen pickups, and you end up having bacteria in the wine, and then when you bottle it, you get high. Your dissolved oxygens increase so high, and things bloom in the bottle. Craig has a saying, if you want a wine to finish fermenting, bottle it, because it'll start fermenting as soon as you bottle it. It might spend 2 years in barrel and do nothing, but as soon as you bottle it, it's guaranteed to get fucked up.
One of the things that I love about you is, last time I came to I haven't been to your tasting room in a while, but I did taste through basically all of your wines last week. And you were the first person to be like, this wine's mousy. This wine, you're like, you're going to hate this wine. This wine's not any good. You tell people.
Craig says that. Craig says that. No, I don't say that.
You said it at your tasting room. Did you make a Grenache or something one year?
Yeah.
Or was it Gam? You made a Grenache and you were like, this wine's not any good. And I was like, Mike, I haven't even tasted it yet.
Oh, yeah.
You're telling me it wasn't good.
Well, you can find the positives in everything. So
sure.
That's the way I like to look at it. And one person's, mousy wine is another person's favorite wine. So
this is what all of these wines find their home.
Exactly. You can't put lipstick on a pig and think that's beautiful.
Some people like pigs with lipstick.
Exactly. There's more of them out there. Let's not fault those people.
Yeah. Okay. So all the vineyards that you work with, like, part of natural winemaking is organic farming, I would assume.
Yeah.
Okay. How far, and this is another issue that I have, right? People everything is based around people who come into the tasting room. People come into the tasting room, they ask me for natural wine, making sure that everything we do is organically farmed. And then they either have a Panino bag or they have like a Taco Bell bag. And so sometimes what I feel like happens is that people expect us as winemakers we have to be like organic, regenerative farmed, no till, adding no yeast, no, ML has to be natural, all these things. And yet somebody will go sit down and have a natural wine with an In-N-Out burger. You're a fan of In-N-Out. Am I
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So where do you draw, like, why to you, like, is it just a terroir issue? It's not like I want to make sure all the cows have eaten organic and we're, food and we're slaughtered humanely. Like, where do you draw that line of like, do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but I don't, I don't, I don't have any pretext or this notion that natural wine is any better for you than conventionally made wine. I mean, that's and people that are saying that are fooling themselves. I mean, it's because wine itself isn't, I guess resveratrol and all those other things in moderation, things are good for you, that portion, but wine in general isn't good for you, and depending on how much you drink, it's bad for you. But I do it because I find it more of a challenge as a winemaker to not fall back on all the things that you can do. It's like that's it's more of a philosophical idea for myself. I mean, I've made wines that aren't natural, and because since I went to school for this, I know how to
Yeah, will
fix
you tell
wine.
us your backgrounds? Because I know that you've worked.
I went to Napa
Yeah.
Valley College. I went to Fresno. But learning the science behind it was important to me, to be as a winemaker, as learning the science behind it, because you can go work in a cellar and but having to know the science behind it, the chemistry and the microbiology is important. I could probably find your liver and remove it, but you'd want a doctor to do it. You'd want a doctor to do it.
Why do you want to remove my liver? I need it for whatever we're going to drink tonight.
Or a kidney. Sorry, kidney is a better one.
Yeah, kidney's better.
It's roughly right here, so I mean, I could probably trach somebody, but having a doctor do it is probably a better way, a better option. But and so fixing wine, I know how to do, and I wouldn't say that I'd take that out of my. We have to remember first and foremost that this is a business and it's a lifestyle I've chosen, and I have a family to help support, and kids to put through college and all these other things. And so you want to make a product that people can feel good about how it was made, and the ethics behind it. But you still have to feed yourself. So I don't fault people, or I don't think anybody should be faulted for making a product just to make the best product they can. But I think Craig and I both enjoy wines with lower alcohol, and we don't want a lot of things added in these big, overly ripe and lousy wines of the 90s and aughts were kind of a comic. It's a horrible way to say it, but I mean, but somehow.
You mean like a caricature? Did you say like a comic?
They're
a caricature of wine.
Of what it should be. The 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s ruined wine, and I think that people put so much what's the word I'm looking for? They put so much into what critics had to say, but critics, Cocteau said, listen to what a critic has to say and nurture what you don't like, because that'll be the only original thought you've ever had. What was the other one? Critic is as useful as a eunuch in a whorehouse. That's what Gautier said.
Okay, you and I are on the same page with critics. I don't want to submit to anyone anymore, because one of the things I'm happy, by the way, to kind of to have a little tangent here about critics. One of the things that I have noticed are critics, when they go visit a winery, give a much higher score when they're there and they're talking to the winemaker and they understand all the process. There's been like two people. Matthew Luzzi, he was writing for Decanter, and then Yarrow, Alder Yarrow, who was writing for Jancis. They were the only two people that have ever showed up to bother to get to know me and Peter and to come to our winery. And I think one of the things that I really like about the natural wine movement is that I hope, because I'm aligned with this, I think critics are are, I don't gotta say in somebody's pocket. I'm not that conspiratorial, but it's just that if they're not coming to see you and to talk to you about what you're doing, and to see that, like with me and Peter, it's just the two of us. With you and Craig, it's you and Craig, and you. I mean, isn't that, I guess, what it comes down to, like the most important thing? Like, who is making the wine? Like when I talk to you and I hear your philosophy about this, like you and I have never actually really talked about this before, which is weird because we've been friends for so long, but like talked about it in this way where you're like, this is important to me as a philosophy to try to do more with less. And I see that, like, I agree with that entirely. But the fact that it's just the two of you, you're like a family business. This is, that to me just says more than if you're making, 20,000 cases and you've got an assistant winemaker and a cellar master. And those wines tend to be the ones that have big winery staffs that get larger scores, I feel like.
Well,
They have more resources.
There's a lot. Yeah, exactly. It's resources. There's a lot invested. And I think people are enamored by celebrity. And, if this place is owned by this person and look at the wines of the world that are made by celebrities and pushed by celebrities, and like it's part of this fetishizing of wealth and celebrity in our culture, that I find sickening. But that's what people fall into, and I don't fault them for that. It's it's a commentary on society. That's the thing. And I think a lot of and I used to believe that this was something about natural wine, that it was like more of like of the people, and it was a community of these people. And I think there is a certain portion of it, but it's really bro-y and kind of stuff like that. And some people,
a little bro-y.
I have friends that have been making natural wine for ever, and then like one person starts a rumor, oh, they do this and they do that, and so it's and they get canceled, or they could do something.
They get canceled in the natural wine movement.
Oh, they get just canceled and everything. It's just this whole, they all have this weird kind of like, I don't know, and a little bit of the natural wine they remind me a little bit of like anti-vaxxers and stuff like that. And it's a little, I sleep well at night, or no, I don't sleep well. I fall asleep well, knowing how I make wine, but I don't stay asleep, but because I just don't stay asleep.
Me and you
both.
But
but a lot of it is that. But I think a lot of people who say they're making natural wine now, maybe they are. Maybe they've seen that this idea that they don't need to add all these things, and it's helping with the sales portion of it, because they are making, like in theory, you and Peter are making natural wine. It's just you don't want to align yourself with that. And like, Romani Conti makes natural wine. It's like all these other people that are making
the world's
wine
most expensive natural wine.
Exactly. Yeah. But there are more than a lot of people, but the faulty portions of natural wine, I agree with you. There's like, people making vinegar and then calling it wine, but maybe the people that are tasting their wine and love it so much have never tasted really what wine should be.
Oh my gosh. Tonight we will, this is so much. Tonight we will talk, and I will name names, but there's somebody, I don't want to, I'm not calling anybody out on this, but there's someone that's pretty prominent in the natural wine movement. They profess and are proud of the fact that they've never had a great Burgundy, that they don't know the classic wines of the world, that they only drink wines in this certain way. And as a master of wine, and I'm saying this because I've been through this. Like I don't know how this is going to sound. I don't care. I've tasted every style of wine that's been made in the world many times over, because I had to do that to pass the master of wine exam, which is you could get tested on any wine in the world, right? Yeah. And so I find great value in going and tasting wines in Rioja, in Tuscany, in Piedmont, in Burgundy, in Bordeaux, in Loire Valley, in Savoie, in all these places, because we see that people, there are people making really great wines, and maybe not the most natural wines, however we classify that, which I don't even think we've done that yet. But I do think it's important to have sometimes a bit of a wine education and to taste if you're in the natural wine movement, maybe to taste wines that are not classified as natural, just as I would taste wines that are natural. Do you know what I mean? Like to
Yeah,
not
no,
be, I guess
it has
dogma
to be.
is like the worst.
No, it
That's
has
what
to
I'm
be.
saying.
It has to be Venice. It has to be wine.
Venice.
And
Yeah.
if you don't have like, selling like, I just went to the Indo-China market in Santa Barbara because we needed black vinegar, and it was delicious black vinegar for making Chinese food. But if you've
But
never
you
had
don't.
black vinegar, would you know how good black vinegar tastes when you're making Chinese food? And so somebody making wine and saying that they're proud to never have had these and don't like these things, and then they're not making wine. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the truth of the matter. They might be making a fermented beverage or making kombucha or whatever it is, that other portion, but that just sounds like somebody trying to stir the pot and make themselves seem more special than they are.
Yeah, I think. The other thing I want to ask you about is sulfur dioxide. So this is
Yeah.
maybe the most controversial additive. I, to this day, get people that come in. It just happened to me. Again, everything stems from the tasting room and what consumers are telling me. This is where this is coming from. Do you have a wine with low SO2? Because, it gives me headaches or whatever. And we know, and this is kind of scientifically proven, that SO2 does not give you headaches. I have asthma, so I do react to high SO2 in wine and I start having problems breathing. Like I get it. It's like, so I get people that are a little resistant to it. The natural wine movement is not no SO2. It is
No.
what people say is low SO2, right? And low SO2, I think we could categorize as less than 100 parts per million total
Yeah, I think some
SO2.
people put it at like 75 even.
Okay,
Or,
all right. So we're
but
somewhere in
but
the
I think
75 to
but I
100.
think but I think even Demeter, who I don't support, says 100. Yeah.
Okay. And you guys use, I didn't know that you used SO2 in your winery until I showed up
Yeah.
last week and you were out
I was
mixing
working on
liquid
the
SO2
SO2.
with
Yeah.
a gas mask
Yeah.
and
Well, the
things.
winery, yeah, yeah. The winery,
So
to be organic, you have to use liquid. Yeah.
okay. Well, yeah, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so to be certified by CCOF, you can use liquid for your wine to say made with organic grapes, not organic wine. You have to use you can't use KMBS, potassium metabisulfite. You have to use liquid sulfur, and so we use liquid sulfur in the wines, and we've made wines without sulfur, and some of them have been good, and some of them have been they get lactic-y and really weird because I think the bottling line affects that. So dissolved oxygen, like oxygen
And
pickup.
just describe what you mean by lactic-y. Just because we might have people
Like
listening that don't. Yeah.
lactic-y. So lactic acid bacteria are what make what like you make sauerkraut and vinegar. So the lactic acid bacteria will bloom in the bottle. There's no residual sugar, but if there's any malic acid left in, or if there's any other thing, they can use other things as carbon sources, and you can end up getting like a pickly, vinegary. They produce acetic acid.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with being heterofermentative or homofermentative lactic acid bacteria, and they'll produce mouse ATHP or ETHP, acetyl tetrahydropyridine and ethyl tetrahydropyridine are the
It
things.
just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
It does. It is. It's so sexy. Yeah. No, it's.
So
But yeah,
the wines that you did not use SO2 on, did you find that they didn't hold up in bottle as well? Is that something like if you were talking to a consumer, you would say, "Hey, we didn't use SO2, so drink this more quickly"?
I think the problem with some of the wines that we made without SO2 is that the élevage is relatively short. You know what the kind of wine that we make is
Elevage, you
slower,
mean aging prior to bottling?
aging prior to bottling. So um, we've bottled some wines, and with less time um, uh, aging, the wines end up having higher solids or other things, and if they're a little cloudy, but then they'll bloom in the bottle once they got air in the bottle, and
Okay.
so what we do now is rack the wines more frequently, remove them off of gross lees instead of doing that, leaving them on gross lees, and that seems to help. But I think if we aged wines longer, but since we do such short aging and make kind of fresh wines, it's harder to make them not get funky. because of how we were bottling. So, but newer bottling lines now, and people are really, because of cost considerations and the age of the bottling lines that we're using, the sparging of bottles and keeping the dissolved oxygen really low is key to making uh, long aging wines and wines that you use less sulfur. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first time because you guys do you guys totally bottle by hand, everything?
No, we have our own little bottling line. It's a
Yeah.
gravity filler and stuff like that, so it doesn't pull vacuum and it doesn't sparge the bottles with
Yeah,
gas.
we have the same.
Filling it
We
out.
have whatever you told us to buy. It's a little
Yeah.
6-bottle filler.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have
And
the
it
same one.
helps, but then
yeah.
if you gas before and you pull vacuum before and you make sure that your bottles have no oxygen in them, then you can hopefully, and the corker pulls vacuum. But when it splashes in the bottle, if there's oxygen in it, then it fills oxygen in it. So you have to sparge the bottles for longer to make sure that there's no oxygen in them.
Well, I remember the first time that we did this hand bottling on this bottling line. That's what I'm calling hand bottling. I mean, not a bottling truck, right? So we're using the bottling line. But I remember texting you, and the sparging of it was so onerous. It's just kind of like, oh my God, this takes forever. It was taking us just a really long time. Yeah, you guys, I know. And then you were like, you have a team. You're also just like, you have to. You told me to buy something else, and we haven't done that yet. Yeah. But I texted you, and I'm like, do I really have to sparge these bottles? And you were like, yes, letters, exclamation mark. I called you and you go, yes, are you dumb? Yes, you didn't say that. Yeah. But like, yes, you have to make sure that there's no oxygen pickup. And we don't, because our corker does not have a vacuum thing. So those are things that help a wine in bottle.
It's better to use, sparge for longer, have it go to the bottom. When we were at Chav, they had a bottling line and it sparges the bottles, but then the filler goes all the way down into the bottom of the bottle and it fills the bottle from the bottom so the wine doesn't splash.
Nice.
It's incredible.
Well,
yeah.
That's Chav for you. That's why you pay for, that's why they talk about resources.
Yeah,
that's why you pay more for that.
He had it designed.
Yes. And then like your thoughts on, these are all questions that I would ask you if we were just sitting at the dinner table, by the way. Your thoughts on carbonic maceration as it relates to showing terroir and not winemaking? Because one of the other things it's winemaking.
Okay. That's a winemaker. Like it shows, like I don't want people to have a misconception that terroir is the most important thing. What's the most important thing in winemaking is the winemaker. Like I am the most important thing in the process. It's not.
I agree.
It is. It's not. This idea. I guess if you're selling a region and you're trying to get that, then there's a great idea. But there's so many variations in it. Carbonic maceration is more about the beverage that you're making and the person making it than it is where you're coming from, because it hides all terroir. I mean, it's different carbonic from Beaujolais than it is from California. We have better sunlight and stuff like that, and growing time, and things might grow differently and express things differently because of it. But that style of winemaking has more to do with the capability of the person making it than where it's coming from.
Great answer. And because I agree with it. That's what makes it a good answer. Okay. Off the topic of natural winemaking, really what the Wine Slut podcast was about was like the business of wine. Like how, as small producers, do we make money? So how do you make money? We usually ease into this question.
No, there's two of us. There's only two of us. Well, there's three of us with Bart too. But there's, and we try to keep costs down. We do most things ourselves. We try to buy less expensive fruit. We buy less expensive glass that's made domestically. Our agglomerate corks, instead of being DM, are made by Amarin, ACI. And so instead of being 35 cents, ours are 15 cents. Because they work just the same, and trying to be thrifty. Why pay someone to do something when you can do it yourself? And we enjoy. I think Craig and I both enjoy. We had a guy coming to sell us chemicals for sanitation. He's like, "Well, where's your cellar master?" And, well, it's just me and Craig, and we're both 56 years old, but I don't mind doing physical labor. That's why I became a winemaker. So that's how you make wine. And you make it up, and we don't make a lot of money. We make a living, and we sell our wine at a point where it sells. So if the market dictates, this, and I know that's the hard part for a lot of people, is that their sense of self-worth is tied to the amount of money that their bottle sells for, and they think that my wine should be $45 because everybody else's is $45.
Hmm.
But maybe they're not making $45 wines. That's why their wines aren't selling. Maybe their wine should be $25 and then they would sell. And just because somebody makes it doesn't make it worth it. That's pretty much it.
That's true. But another thing that you do and is you work with grape varieties that when you purchase them by the ton are less expensive. So
Yeah.
when I tasted with you, Arento, right? Who's making Arento? You are, right? Gamay,
Yeah.
Granger, which is in the
Well, the
pipeline.
Granger is going to be expensive.
The Granger's
Granger
okay,
is going to
good.
be expensive.
Well,
No,
what's
not
expensive?
but at least $35.
$35 is like dirt
No.
cheap in Santa Barbara County.
No, but we'll see, because I farm it, but I think it'll be priced. I mean, yeah, there's not much Granger in the world, so 30 hectares.
I don't know how I'm going to post this, but I want to figure it out on social media that you sent me an article from Decanter about Granger, because I've been making fun of
Yeah.
you that every time we get together, you talk about Granger, but I really didn't know how special it was actually, and how little of it there are in the world,
Yeah.
and how it was really like a single man's,
Dominique
effort.
Bellaward, yeah.
Yes, to bring it back. And I didn't also know that he committed suicide. And then there's this now this idea in the Savoie that we're going to sort of bring this
Bring
grape
Granger
variety back. And you
Yeah.
were mentioned in this article. And when you sent it to me, and I just read the sentence about you, and I screamed out loud, and I sent it to Peter. Look at our friend Mike. He's Decanter famous, which is famous in the wine world. That's
Yeah.
very famous.
Well, it probably won't. We'll see if it sells any wine. But
yeah, but I mean, I can't wait to have it. So
Oh, yeah.
your vineyard, so you've got a little vineyard on your property. So you purchase grapes, but you also grow some of your own grapes.
Yes.
We do the same.
Yeah.
Your property is at your house, and you have a front
Yeah.
vineyard and a back vineyard. So
yeah,
just tell us about your vineyard and cost of farming, and do you make money off those wines? What are your farming costs per ton?
My farming cost, not per ton, it varies. Like last year, our farming costs were higher because we pulled a vineyard out and we replanted a vineyard, so that we make enough money from the vineyard selling the grapes. Karen and I grow the grapes.
Karen, your wife.
My wife, yeah, and then we have two guys, Melchades and Victor, that help us in the vineyard part time. And our cost of farming, we make enough money to pay our property taxes every year. That's about it, except for last year. Last year was the first year we lost money.
Last year was a bad yield year all around for everyone.
It wasn't that we didn't yield well. We pulled out the Gamay, so it decreased our production, and we had higher expenses because of the increase in farming from pulling the vines and planting vines and tending them. And the same thing this year. We won't get any fruit out of it, so we're farming more, but getting less. But
why did you pull the Gamay out?
So the Gamay was like a masal. We had gathered all the Gamay around that we could to do it, and a lot of it was diseased from the get-go. So it's all unrooted, and the stuff that we got the cuttings from was most likely on rootstocks, and the rootstocks helped suppress disease, viruses and stuff like that. So it was still producing the Gamay, and I think if I was a better farmer, it would have done a better job. But the production was decreasing rather dramatically, and a lot of vines weren't producing hardly any fruit. So I was getting less fruit, but from only a few vines were producing, and I was asking more of those vines, and that's just not a good way to farm. And so you had to pull the Band-Aid off and replant it. And this year,
so before you had by Masal, you mean you had gotten?
We just gathered anywhere we could
gathered,
get,
from Gamay from various places, right?
Yeah.
And so where did you purchase from a nursery the second time around for?
I got cuttings for the Granger from Raj, and then I took them to a vineyard and had them grafted onto St. George, which is a rupestris rootstock that's really drought tolerant and vigorous. So it would mimic as much as the unrooted stuff.
So the Gamay came out and Granger is going in.
Yeah, Granger and Savignon, yes.
And that's all. That's all I got for you. I just wanted to chat.
Yeah.
I might actually have other stuff to chat to you about if you ever want to come back and talk to me. But
Yeah, all the time.
because I love talking to you. Like one of the things Mike, that just impresses me every time is you're such a science head. You and Tyler Thomas are these super like analytical, sciencey minds. You guys approach winemaking from different angles, but you actually, unlike I feel like a lot of people that come into the wine space, including me and Peter, by the way, we have no formal training in winemaking and have made a lot of mistakes along the way. But you're actually, if I ask you something about science, like you actually know the answer. You're not, a dum-dum.
No, but for myself is I don't have the palate that other people. I mean, I know what I like, and I'm school teaches you how to find flaws. It doesn't teach you how to enjoy wine.
Oh, that's interesting. That's so true.
Yeah. So a lot of that is, but I want to straddle both the things. It's, you have to straddle both of those lines as you want the artistry of something. The whole thing about like, going to Davis or going to Fresno. And I think, I didn't have the brain to go to Davis. Or maybe I would have, maybe I'm cutting, but you don't have to become a mechanical engineer to become a carpenter to make a cabinet for a speaker or anything like that, or how sound travels through wood. It's but it helps me explain what I'm thinking about. It's fact. I don't think we need a good fact-based society.
We don't live in that anymore. I don't know what you're talking about.
Facts.
There are no more facts. There's just beliefs. There's just things we tell ourselves that we choose to believe.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, And I really agree. I think this anti-vax natural wine is a really good comparison. These people, a lot of them don't align themselves politically that way, but they seem to align them. It's like a big circle.
It's totally a circle. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to talk to you more tonight when I see you, and
Sounds
I love
good.
you and thank you.
And we'll have a good time.
Okay, I'm going to the tasting room so I can have more people walk in and ask me for natural wine. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, what you should do is tell them this is completely natural.
I never know what to say. It's the SO2 thing that throws people off.
Well, you can throw SO2 as like, we've had wines that we sent in to have analysis on, and it has 15 parts sulfur naturally. But what you can do is explain to them that sulfur is naturally occurring in wines. Yeah. It's part of the fermentation process.
Peter and I would never add more than 100 parts. We were talking about it this morning. Like that would be like a red wine with the highest pH is never going to reach molecular anyway, but you just add enough to kind of try to get yourself as safe as you can be.
I always say that to Craig, but it isn't safe. It's not.
I know. I know.
It doesn't.
I know. It doesn't matter.
Wine, and Craig will be like, let's add 10 parts. And I'm like, well, why? You might as well just put your finger in there and swirl it around. It's not. It's doing the same exact thing. That's what it is. Just add to your total.
Totally. Absolutely.